22 minutes after 2 o'clock. Welcome back. You're watching the Wednesday edition. In fact, we're in the second hour of the Wednesday edition of the Midday View here on eNCA DSTV channel 403, where we are continuing to reflect on some issues that are facing women in South Africa. Of course, August drawing to a close soon, being Women's Month. I'm joined by Lebo Ramafoko in Cape Town, Malerato Mosiane in Johannesburg, and we've been talking so far about the challenges around GBV in particular, because it's still top of mind. Tragically, the scourge of GBV is still very much with us, especially with that gruesome murder that we've been reporting on. And we saw the memorial service today at the University of Fort Hare of the murdered student Nosikelo. I've got Malerato and Lebo. Can I start with you, Malerato? The numbers that you deal with as a researcher, when you see them from a labor perspective, the unemployment numbers, I mean, are still telling us that in addition to GBV, because Lebo was mentioning economic violence earlier, in addition to GBV that we can see that is visible all the time, you've got this lack of inclusion of women in terms of the stats as well in the labor space. And that's ongoing. 27 years into a democracy, that's still a problem. I mean, the latest numbers must show the gap.
Yes, we still see a huge gap between men and women when it comes to even benefits that they get in the workplace. You know, the basic standards and rights of employees in the workplace, they form an integral part of the decent work agenda. But the figures that we are seeing are telling a different story. For instance, if you look at in terms of just getting a basic benefit of paid leave, paid sick leave, we see that men still are benefiting more than women, where we're seeing about 76% of men getting paid leave as opposed to 73% among women. Even a basic need of maternity leave, women are still struggling. A very low proportion among women get maternity leave compared to men who get a very high, who have a high percentage in terms of those who are getting paternity leave. Yet a paternity leave was introduced just recently. About 83.5% of men get paternity leave compared to 76% of women.
The struggle, I mean, for equality feels like, listening to you, Malerato, answering that, and earlier, Lebo, the struggle for equality, for women's emancipation, feels like it hasn't really progressed to the levels where one would have expected in 2021. Am I wrong, Lebo?
No, you are not wrong, but I also think that we must not erode the gains that have been made, because the mere fact that, you know, we are monitoring and we are having a gendered lens to even unpacking the numbers around labor, etc., is important. What we are saying and what we've always said is that the numbers themselves, without almost a revolution and serious commitment from all stakeholders, is absolutely, we are not going to get there. So, for an example, I listened to Malerato as well, and I was smiling when I looked at paternity leave, because unless you create an enabling environment, men will always win. So on one level, a lot of women and women activists were saying for equality to happen, you also need to give men a paternity leave, but it did not address what are the challenges in maternity leave right now, and how many women are then even forced not to take it, even if it is not there. So I wish we could even have a Minister of Finance who provides and gives us a gendered budget, a feminist budget, a budget that basically says we are not going for equality, but for equity. And equity simply means where there has been injustice, you need to give much more resources and much more effort. Because the minute you don't acknowledge that there was inequality and injustice, those that are forward will always be forward, even when you bring in something like maternity leave. And I think we are not seeing an economy that is transformed enough. We still have a neoliberal agenda. We still talk austerity measures. We still say when you give people grants, they will depend on them. without recognizing the historical imbalance that have put women where they are at the moment. And we need greater political will. We need greater accountability to make sure that we redress some of these things. And it's not going to be easy because those with power do not want to give it up easily.
Yeah, power relations become a factor. The numbers, Malerato, showing that economically, in terms of activity, women are there, but they're not at the same level, as you've said earlier. And I'm just wondering if you've picked up any trend, let's say over the last 3-4 years, as you study these numbers as Stats SA, to see if something somewhere perhaps is changing. You mentioned earlier that even when it comes to benefits in the workplace, women are not getting the same benefits as men. Women as well supported paternity leave, but only a smaller percentage of them are using it. 80-something% of men are using it. Have you seen some shifts for the better? Because while I've said earlier that it looks like there's no progress, Lebo says, no, there has been some gains. Let's not forget that we're still facing challenges, but there have been some gains.
Yes, there has been some gains over time. As women, we are starting from a very low base. So over the past 10 years, we have seen the proportion of women that are participating in the labor market increasing from where it was 10 years ago. And you see that even the proportion of women in managerial positions, it is increasing, but at a slow pace. It's way better than what it was 10 years ago.
Yeah. Okay. And my next question is, we've just got about 3 minutes max now left before we conclude. I know, Malerato, you're focusing on numbers, but my next question, I'm going to ask you to put on the hat of being a South African woman. And having listened to you and Lebo here, there's a lot of challenges. We are wrapping up yet another August month. It looks like when you come to this month, the whole world, we're focusing on women's issues, but women's issues are daily issues as well. How do you begin to address them if you don't mainstream the gender issues, for example, Lebo? I mean, you hear about the need for that, to say we should be mainstreaming. You've mentioned that we need a budget in the country by a finance minister that will be more revolutionary than before. How do we do that? Because you've mentioned culture. There are cultural challenges there where the way women are treated. There's religious issues as well, as you've said. How do we begin to address? I mean, in the last 3 minutes we've got, if you could just come up with what you think would be the way forward. Lebo, let me start with you.
Well, I mean, at the moment, we have written a letter to the Deputy Speaker of Parliament to look at the problems that beset the Commission for Gender Equality, which is a Chapter 9 institution that is meant to basically ensure that the rights of women in the Constitution are protected. And if you sort it out and you make sure that it is a gender commission that is robust, that is feminist, that does not have interference, from those who are contesting power, then that would be one thing that you do. If you start looking at the role of churches in the religious sector, some of these socializing institutions, you control them more. You make sure that women are protected there. If you go into the workplace and make sure that domestic workers, farm workers, and all other workers who are working in the margins of this economy are protected, their labor rights are protected, you will be doing something. If you start resourcing the national strategy on gender-based violence and you make sure that it works and you hire competent people, competent ministers, people who really know what they are doing, if there is accountability amongst those that are accused of sexual offenses, you make sure that we've got a minister of police that knows what they are doing, and then they make sure that those perpetrators are brought to book. There's so many things to do when you've got challenges. But what is lacking right now, I think, is political will and just to hold the bull by the horns and do it.
Okay. Malerato, I mean, you've seen the numbers, you study the numbers. I mean, when you look at them, what should we focus on the country to make sure that women begin to feel included properly and there's equity?
As Stats SA, we will continue to produce these statistics and highlighting the plight of women in the South African labor market and in terms of the challenges that they are facing. And I guess it's up to the line departments that are responsible for putting programs in place to ensure that women's participation in the labor market is at the forefront. And they also put programs in place to ensure that the challenges that they are facing are addressed so that in going forward, they don't face the similar challenges. And we also have to make sure that we provide these statistics to monitor the national development program that the government has put in place. And this program also highlights the plight of women in terms of making sure that going forward, the women and girl children's rights are at the center of the programs that government puts in place.
Thank you very much. Malerato Mosiane, Chief Director, Labour Stats at Stats SA, and also Lebo Ramafoko, Chief Executive for Tekan Atlantic Fellows for Health Equity. Thank you very much for that discussion there. On the midday view on eNCA, just getting some views, some insights, because every year we're here in August, it's Women's Month, and every year, sadly, and every day, in fact, there's a GBV case, but we seem to be making slow progress. So they were sharing some of the insights with us here on the midday view. And still ahead,